Yeah, because there are like specific questions asked by Nerdgasm. We know his name by now, and very interesting because yeah, we just open also like the numbers next to it. So how much income and profit would one node make for YOM running full-time work on an average card like the 4060 Ti? Okay, so here's a little bit of something that we changed in semantics, right? So we now say, okay, a computer, a gaming rig can host multiple nodes, right? They can host up to 8 nodes. And we do that because the node effectively acts as a container, as a compute unit that kind of provides a range of rewards. So it's standardized in a way. Whereas indeed, Boudewijn, as you're saying, with like you're mentioning a card like a 4060 Ti, which is then we have to figure out, okay, how many nodes work on that specific setup, because it's not just the 4060 Ti, but it's also the RAM and the CPU and all of that stuff. So to avoid getting into these constant discussions of like how much money I'm going to make on my specific setup, what we're going to work on is release a tool. And we already have like a rough tool available, but a more improved benchmarking tool where you can assess before you purchase how many nodes you can run on your specific setup, right? A single node provides on average about $90 in yield, but it can actually go up to $140 per node, right? If your gaming computer allows for 8 nodes, that's about $700 for your gaming rig, right? Like assuming 50% workload. Now, when is that 50% workload reached? That is entirely dependent on the games we're distributing and sharing around, right? So that is very much dependent on that. We have made quite a lot of calculations on the different types of games out there. It follows some kind of Pareto distribution. So we have to also identify, okay, what are the best partners to work with, because we don't necessarily want to overload the network at first, especially because these are these are games, AAA games that are now running inside of Telegram, right? So they have the potential to really go viral and overload the network. So we made a lot of calculations around that, and that kind of hooks into Boudewijn's second question, which is, okay, when is the network going to be, let's say, when is the company going to be profitable on the network transactions, right? So we take 20% of the network fees, and that basically allows us that at 20 games that are deployed, whereby we assume 10 of those games are actually still in development and 10 are in operations, we would be able to completely fund all of the operations here at YOM. And that excludes all of the liquidity pool and market making revenues, right? So we put that entirely aside. We say, okay, we as a company, as an ecosystem, aim for a profit on the product value itself, on the DePIN value itself, rather than on the liquidity and the trading aspects of it, which is what actually a lot of the token projects get seduced into, right? Because at some point, your token goes so high to the moon that you make like 10 times or 100 times more money on your market making than on the product itself. And that's something that I personally also try to prevent in a way. So that may not be the best, I would say, on the short term for the token. But I feel on the long term, it's actually the best strategy. Because if we now have a token that is like worth $1 billion and we make so much money on the liquidity and the trading part of it, yeah, who's then going to build the network? Because what would be the incentive towards building that, right? So that's weird.
Again, it sounds like you're trying to make a proper business, Jorrit. What's going on?
Yeah, I know, right? I know. And I think in a way, a lot of the users, like a lot of the community members, they also want this, right? They want the deep value, but then again, they also want the short-term gains at the same time, right? So it's it's an interesting trade-off.
It can be both. It can be both.
It can be both.
Just a quickie here, actually. When you say 20 games, though, you're not talking 20 AAA games. You're talking 20 small to medium-sized games. So domination, 20,000 users per month. Small numbers. We can probably hit that within the first year. I think the numbers are, aren't they?
Right. So we have some specifics also on the average. So it would be, so if you kind of imagine like 7 tiers of games in terms of sizes, then the lowest tier would be the games that are just in development, right? They're just for internal testing purposes. So we need about 10 of those because they also pay a fixed fee every month, right? So we take that in immediately. And then we have 10 other quite low tier games that are also deploying on the network. And then the combined network activity out of that, and we're still assuming only 50% of network saturation would translate in about $120,000 per month, which is kind of like a very nice and healthy number. In fact, we would probably already reach break even way before that, but we of course also have ambitious plans going into the future where we want to hire more people, right? So I'm upscaling it to 120K in terms of operating expense.
YOM.